On today's show, we continue our Houston Rockets draft profile series, today focusing on the versatile big man from the Perth Wildcats, Alexandre Sarr. We'll tackle his strengths, his weaknesses, potential NBA player comps, projected draft range, his fit with the Houston Rockets, and so much more. It's all coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That's the best way you can help our show, is to comment anything on the YouTube video. Just go say Go Rockets, or, for the house, for the team, for the algorithm. Do that for me. It helps out a ton. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for being an everydayer. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, NBA draft enthusiast, and diehard Houston Rockets fan, Madison Moore. You can track down on Twitter at MadManLeaks. Here as we continue our Locked On Rockets draft profile series. Our last episode, we talked about Kentucky's Reed Shepherd. Be sure to go check that one out if you missed it. Today, we're focusing on Alexandre Sarr from overseas, playing for the Perth Wildcats, the maybe not consensus number one overall pick in this year's draft, since there's a lot of uncertainty at the top of the pecking order, but clearly one of the players with the most upside at the top of this year's draft. And right out of the gate, Madison, people might be wondering why we're talking about Alex Sarr if there's a lot of mocks that have him going, number one to Atlanta or number two to the Wizards, because we've seen crazier things happen, right? Think about the Jabari Smith Jr. draft, where he was the consensus number one guy, and then somehow he fell into the Houston Rockets' lap at number three, which is why we're talking about Alex Sarr on today's episode, a very intriguing prospect. So hit me with your elevator pitch for Sarr right out of the gate.
Yeah, Alexandre Sarr is the modern day center. It's the type of center that many teams want. Defending the paint and being able to switch and be a multi-positional defender. Versatility is the thing that Alex Sarr does best. Is that he is going to be able to play in any type of defensive coverage. He's going to be able to block shot. He has a 7'4.5" wingspan, which allows him to block shots under the rim and really protect the protect the paint. And he's also has the ability to flip his hips and really move in space. It allows him to rotate very quickly, and it also allows him to guard out on the perimeter, where he does a very good job mirroring guards and contesting jump shots. So when you add that into a 7-footer and when you put that into his body set, that really is a appealing and versatile type of guy. And of course, you can't forget about the offense. He will already be able to be a lob threat, a dunker spot finisher. But he also has shooting potential. He shot 30% from three this past year, around 29.8%, which isn't great, but he has great mechanics, and you can definitely project that moving forward. And so he not only has the ability to play defensive versatility, but he has the ability to stretch the floor as well as play as a dunker spot finisher. And that is what you want in the modern NBA.
So he's incredibly versatile, right? And so we could sit here and go on and on and on about his versatility. We did talk about Alex Sarr a little bit in a previous episode as well. I think that let's spend a little bit of time focusing on, what are some of the reasons that Sarr might not translate to the NBA level? Madison, what stands out to you immediately when you look at him as maybe a potential downside to his game, or something that could be one of the kind of drawbacks to what he is as a player?
Yeah, for me, it's always a question of how polished is Alexandre Sarr, how good is his upside to actually reach some of these outcomes. I think he has a little bit of everything for the position, but honestly, he doesn't do a lot of those things well enough right now to do at a high level in the NBA. And the only thing I really think that he does at a high enough level to come in and contribute right away is honestly just the defensive versatility. I don't think he's like an elite finisher of any case. He's definitely not an elite 3-point shooter. A lot of that stuff is theoretical. And a lot of people project his upside as having some type of Anthony Davis type upside because he can put the ball on the floor. He has like some fluidity in his offensive package that kind of you can see if you squint hard enough, this offensive creator. But all of that is very theoretical, and it's a very good chance that he never just reaches that level offensively to fulfill any of those outcomes. And let's just say he's not able to survive on the perimeter like we project him to. Then you're looking at a backup center type player.
See, so one of the main kind of knocks, I guess, that I see when people discuss Sarr, so far at least, is right. He only played like 18 minutes a game for the Wildcats, right? He it's not like he was their go-to guy or their number one option or any of that. And so how much of a knock should that be on him? That because first off, I think it speaks volumes about him as a player that he went from overtime elite and then decided, you know what, I'm going overseas. I'm going to the NBL, right? Widely regarded as one of the better leagues in the world when you talk about basketball, right? It's right up there. You've got, NBL, you've got the Turkish league, you've got Euro League, you've got NBA, obviously top of the pecking order. But to go from overtime elite, which, hey, when we talked about, Amin and Sarr last year in the draft cycle, overtime elite is like kind of just, it's a bunch of high school kids, right? It's like glorified AAU. It's not a ton of structure. So to go from that, where he could have very easily looked like prime Shaq playing against some of that competition, to go to a league where he's going to be facing grown men and playing real minutes against real competition, I think it speaks a lot about his character and that he wanted that challenge as a player to grow and better himself.
Yeah, and I think it's something to be said that those minutes are earned and not given. A lot of these prospects in these situations, guys are throwing the ball out and just letting you go do whatever, and winning isn't on the agenda. And that's partly why he got 17 minutes of game. At the end of the day, this is a young guy. This guy is a 18, 19-year-old guy playing in a man's league. And honestly, he was very productive in those 17 minutes. And when those minutes scaled up, I think he translated that production. And not to mention, there are a couple of games where Alexandre Sarr finished games in crunch time and made incredible defensive plays and made a very good impact. And I think the production that he provided was very real in a real winning context. And that is very important when projecting forward. These guys are not going to come in the league and, destroy the league right now. You have to project that development forward, but there is something to be said that you can have productive minutes in a winning context against grown men.
His per 36 numbers, since a lot of this is theoretical and kind of projecting for him, it makes sense to take his per 36. Now, thankfully, because he averaged 18 minutes a game, it's just you double the numbers and call it the end of the day. He averaged 19.2 points per game. Again, per 36 numbers. These are not the real stats, but 19.2 points per game, 9 boards per contest, couple of assists, 3.1 blocks, and about a steal per game in his per 36 numbers. So again, you just double what he actually did in his 18 minutes per contest. And I do think in a lot of cases when we've been talking about some of these prospects, Madison, a lot of them would be developmental guys that the Rockets would draft and slow play. I do think Sarr would be one of the few that you could actually see a way where he could come in and have an immediate impact. Talked about the defense, right? Just from that perspective alone, is I could see Ime being willing to like tinker with certain lineups and test out certain looks with maybe Sarr at the 5 or lining him up at the 4 next to Alperen. We'll probably explore that conversation a little bit more when we get to some of the fit stuff a little bit later on in the show. But coming up, we want to get into some of our NBA comps for Sarr, as well as other elements of his game that we want to tackle. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more players' stats and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is so simple to play. You can make your picks and submit an entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and different stat types are what makes Prize Picks the #1 DFS app on the market. And look, NBA Finals are right around the corner. You can still get in on the the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during the NBA postseason. So if you've been thinking about getting into daily fantasy sports, try Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go grab the app, use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, where we are discussing Alex Sarr as a potential prospect for the Houston Rockets with that number 3 overall selection. One other area, Madison, that I guess is maybe a bit of an area of concern for Sarr is I do wonder, and this is more so an area of concern that I have with a lot of 4 or 5 tweeners, when you start thinking about the modern day NBA, that stuff, is how much he's going to be able to deal with the physicality of the NBA game, right? Is he going to be a guy that gets ragdolled around? And I think we'll go on like one opposite end of the spectrum here, because look, Triple J is like, that's amazing, right? He doesn't get bullied. Like, he's an incredible defender, DPOY guy, all that stuff. But on the opposite end of the 4 or 5 tweener spectrum, let's go with a Rockets fan favorite here, Christian Wood, right? Like, there's a problem there. Is you could get one of those two outcomes. So I do have my concerns there a little bit. And it's not, again, what are you seeing from him? Do you think that physicality is going to be something that he has to work on, or that could be a problem for him down the line?
I mean, like most young rookies, physicality, especially bigs, physicality is a weakness for them, and for Alex Sarr is no different, right? But what I do like about that, I believe that most guys, if they're hard workers, they're going to get bigger, they're going to grow into their bodies, and to me, Sarr does not shy away from contact. And that is one of the things I like to look forward to in the prospect. I mean, we can see that even in Jalen Green's game just this year, about how he defends with his chest in the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. There's a certain mentality that comes with defense, and the strength will come eventually. But as long as you have the mentality to play with your chest, strong chest, right now he's going to get moved off his spot. Like that's why he's not going to be able to play starter minutes. He's going to get moved up off his spot. But he played in the league with grown men, and I think he held his own pretty well, but you could see it really shine through in the finishing. There's tough times. He has tough time finishing through contact. But for me, I didn't see him really shying away. He wasn't trying to avoid the contact. He's still trying to go straight up through guys. And to me, those are the things that I look for. Are you afraid of contact? And for me, I don't think strength will be a long-term issue for him. And I even though he has a slender body set, I think it will fill out really well. So not an issue long term, but definitely going to be an issue probably the first 2-3 years.
Okay. All right. And again, that shouldn't be an issue for the Rockets if he does drop to 3, because again, this is going to be a guy that the Rockets are going to be able to slow play the development of over the first, 2-3 years of his career. This next part might be a little bit, remedial for certain people. If you do remember us doing the episode previously where we talked about what if the Rockets jump up to the number or jump into the top 4 or whatever with the Brooklyn pick, which ultimately happened. Again, we're going to keep taking credit for that we manifested that outcome here at Locked On Rockets. But let's get to our NBA comps for Alex Sarr. We already teased one of them there, which is Triple J, although I can't remember off the top of my head. I think he was one of your high-end outcomes for Sarr. So let's stick to our usual pattern. We'll do the low, then the medium, then the high-end outcomes for Alex Sarr.
Yeah, so low end, let's say I think a really good low end outcome for Alex Sarr is Thon Maker, a former lottery pick, a guy who was slender, had a lot of versatility, long, could block shots, and had the upside to be a shooter or creator in his future, right? The guy saw a lot of potential, but he just wasn't quite there yet, right? And we watched Thon Maker have a couple good years in the league and kind of just fall out, right? And so that is the fear of guys who are not super skilled, but you can just theoretically see the future. So Thon Maker, I thought, was a really good one in the low end outcome. And then we have Channing Frye. That's if the defensive toughness never really comes through and he's just a serviceable defender and becomes a really trigger happy 3-point shooter, which I think he can lull himself into at times. And so Channing Frye and Chris Boucher, of course, as I alluded to last time, which is another guy, serviceable backup big, but never does anything at a high enough level to become a starter in this league.
Oh, and I remember this from last time too, because it's Boucher. It's the French name.
I said it wrong again.
We got to work on this because we got to talk about Risa next week, and I can't have you come in here calling Risa. So
no. I got Risa down, but I literally say Boucher every time. It's stuck in my head. Can't do it. Boucher, guys.
He's Chris Boucher now. No, it's cool. He's Chris Boucher. No, all right,
people were calling me out on Twitter about it and everything.
You're good. You're good. All right,
it's all good.
We got our low ends out of the way. Let's get to the mid tier outcomes.
Yeah, so the median outcomes, a lot of guys remember this, but Miles Turner, I think he's a very similar size to Miles Turner, especially coming out, but Miles Turner filled out very well. He's a shot blocker with some shooting upside, not a tremendously great shooter, right? But a good enough serviceable shooter to stretch the floor. I think that's a realistic median outcome, very realistic for him to make. Also, Nick Claxton. That's if the shot never comes around in a real way. He still has the finishing ability because he's athletic. He can he can finish in the lane with jump hooks,
playing over the top and stuff.
Over the top, exactly. Yeah. But most importantly, I think Nick Claxton's defensive versatility is the most comparable to what Alex Sarr can do as a defense. I think that is the perfect guy for the way he plays defense, the way he moves in space, and also protects the rim. So that is a realistic outcome defensively.
And then offensively, right? Like if we're talking about that as a defensive outcome, a defensive ceiling, Nick Claxton, who again, in the running for DPOY, like, very easily could win one at some point in his career. And then offensively, even if you're just a kind of traditional, like, rim running lob threat big, that's still, we talk about it all the time. Vertical spacing was an element that the Rockets were sorely missing last year in their offense. It does open things up. You don't have to be a 3-point shooter to provide spacing to your team.
Yeah, of course. And Nick Claxton's body type is very similar to Alex Sarr's, and I think it's just actually perfect the way he moves. That's a realistic outcome as well. And lastly, for median outcomes, and you can kind of put this in the tweener between median and high, I think Serge Ibaka. I think Serge Ibaka was a guy who stretched the floor in a very, very good rim deterrent, right? And so that's if, he's just passable on the perimeter, but that rim deterrent, defensive shot blocker really comes through in a real way. And then he's a serviceable shooter. I think Serge Ibaka is a really good outcome.
And what's real funny is Serge, people don't remember this. He wasn't a shooter right out of the gate. So very similar to Sarr, right? Like, he had to work on that 3-point shot and eventually get it to a place where he was a reliable, consistent outside 3-point shooter. And then that really helped unlock OKC's offense when he got to a point where defenses had to start treating him as a shooter and start closing out on him.
Yeah, another guy that came in really skinny as well and filled out very well. I think that's a very similar body type. I think Jabari will fill out in those ways as well, just, reference. But let's get to the high ends, right? And so the first high end is about, Evan Mobley. So Evan Mobley, the way Evan Mobley was immediately a DPOY candidate, all-teamer defensively. I think they move very similarly on the perimeter. And so that's both if he just hits the highest end outcome defensively. I think Evan Mobley is there, and also adding in some passing elements, but the offense never really comes around in a real way. So I think Evan Mobley is one. Another one is
Evan Mobley over here catching strays about his offense on Locked On Rockets from Madison. Yeah. That's just facts at this point. So all right,
that's just facts, man. I mean, if you want to be talked about better,
facts,
then play
facts
better.
Facts only at this point. All right,
that's it. All right, but also, like you said, Jaren Jackson. I think Jaren Jackson is a very realistic outcome if the offensive game starts to come around in a real way. I think, Jaren is a great shooter, and Jaren has kind of developed some play off the bounce and able to finish that at the basket. I think that's a realistic option for how Alexandre Sarr can begin 5-6 years down the line, really developing an offensive game while maintaining that defensive prowess. And lastly, I mentioned this last time, but this is one of my favorite ones, is Kristaps Porzingis. I think Kristaps Porzingis is a really good option. Just that's if the shooting comes on really strong, a really elite shooter who also can play a bit on the perimeter, and it just is a real rim deterrent defensively. I think those are all really good options, and that's why Sarr is going to be considered in the number, the top 3 picks in this draft. It's because he has a real ability to be one of those top high-end guys.
And we saw just how impressive Porzingis was this year with a Celtics team with great point of attack defenders and him being really the sole big on the floor in their starting lineup. But the way that it worked, right, is he has great rim protection, great length in and around the painted area, and still that versatility to, slide out on the perimeter, hold his own on certain switches, certain mismatches, that kind of thing. And so it worked out really well for the Celtics this year. And again, there is Ime Udoka has this affinity, right? He loves switching defenses. He couldn't do it with Alperen Sengun, and he still can't do it with Alperen Sengun. But being able to throw multiple looks out there as a coach is always better than being stuck to playing, or kind of hamstrung into playing a certain way. And that would be the really appealing thing about adding Alex Sarr to this team, is there would be so many different ways you could play him, right? You could play him alongside Sengun, you could play him as the backup to Sengun, you could play him as the straight up 5, and then you could go with a jumbo big lineup if you wanted to throw Tari and Jabari and Jeff Green out there and just have a bunch of wings with Sarr as your 5 and switch everything and have all this size. The possibilities are honestly endless. And that's what we got to talk about coming up here next, is how would he fit on this Rockets team? What would he look like playing alongside some of these players on the current roster? As well as, why are we talking about him again if he's projected to go at number 1 or number 2? We're going to get into, I saw a hypothetical that I want to talk about with you in just a second. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, where, Madison, I got to hit you with this question because I think I know the answer here based on some of our previous conversations. But I saw somebody suggest, would Sarr be, or is Sarr an attractive enough prospect? Would you be willing to trade the 3rd overall pick and Jabari to the Hawks for Sarr? I saw this floating around. I saw it gaining some steam online or whatever. And I saw it and I immediately said no, right? I saw it and I was like, there's no way. Sarr is an intriguing prospect. Absolutely. Is he maybe the best prospect or the most interesting prospect of the bunch in this year's draft? For me, I think he is. And that's why when we were doing our boards, I had a number 1, right? Even though he might be out of the Rockets' range by the time pick 3 comes around. But I don't think he's a good enough prospect or a tantalizing enough prospect to want to trade a young piece like Jabari Smith Jr. to move up 2 spots to get, especially because there's still a reality where maybe he falls to 3 and you don't have to pay anything extra to get him.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't do it at all. And the reason I wouldn't do it is because I think Jabari just has another level offensively that he can reach that I think is a bit further away from Sarr. I think, and
plus Jabari's more of a wing. And Sarr is more of a big, is the problem.
I disagree. I mean, Jabari's more of a 4, and I think Sarr's more of a 5. I don't like Jabari scaling up. But I will say, I think Jabari has more guard skills. I honestly, I do. He does have more guard skills. I just think he weaponizes them best as a 4 or 5. But like I said, I just think Jabari has a higher outcome offensively, while still maintaining a very high level defensively. I think Sarr has a higher outcome defensively just because of the rim protection and length and just sheer size, and that might fit next to Sengun a little bit better, like what we're going to talk about. But I think Jabari is still an excellent defender and is still improving and still filling out his body. And once he gets there physically and mentally, which he's already taken a step in the right direction in, he's going to pair that with his offensive upside. And I think he's going to be a much better player.
The more, as I've been kind of surveying the landscape and seeing what some other, mocks are throwing out and stuff, and hearing what other teams and other fan bases are talking about, I keep seeing Risa Shea to the Hawks. And for some reason, the Wizards are really obsessed with adding Klingon. So, I think there's a very real possibility that Sarr could find himself at number 3. And if he's there at number 3, that is a no-brainer. You take him at number 3 and you are ecstatic that would be the crown jewel of the Rockets rebuild, is to add that as the final piece to flesh out and round out the core 7 of prospects. Because as we've talked about, and we're about to talk about the fit and everything, Sarr provides a skill set that isn't already on this Rockets roster, right? He provides the vertical spacing. He provides the defensive versatility from the 5 spot, which again, the Rockets have a lot of versatile defensive pieces in Jabari and Tari and Amin Thompson, but none of them are true 5s yet at this point, which is why we had this same conversation when we talked about Donovan Klingon. Klingon would also provide something that is not currently on this Rockets roster by way of a legit drop big, right? Massive, completely change the complexion of your defense. And it's funny because I remember having conversations all the way back to summer, 2023, when right after Ime was hired and being in Las Vegas Summer League and talking with some of the Rockets staffers there and everything. And like, Ime really loves playing a switch everything defense. And we wound up seeing a lot more of Jabari at the 5 than I think we were expecting because of the Sengun injury. So by necessity, but that's exactly why, like, if Sarr and Klingon are both on the board at the same time, which I don't think that they would be, but if the Rockets had their pick between Sarr and Klingon, I think they're taking Sarr 10 out of 10 times. They're not taking Klingon over Sarr.
Yeah, 10 out of 10 times they're taking Sarr over him. Like you said, for the defensive versatility, for the ability to be able to switch, but also for the upside of him playing next to Sengun in the future, right? And like you said, maybe Jabari does develop these wing abilities. Maybe his handle takes an outlier development, and he can move down to the 3, and you can really just provide this huge lineup, right? But that's what Sarr's versatility allows you to do. You get the rim deterrent that you need behind Sengun, so Sengun plays in the pick and rolls and can hedge hard, and you have this backside free safety that is able to clean up everything, all the mistakes, the ultimate free safety, and of course match with the defensive improvement of Jalen Green and already the defensive prowess of Tari, Amon, and all our other defensive wings. And then you're really cooking with some real heat that can play in different types of ways when you get into the playoffs, because that's what this is about. This is not about just building a 82-win team. It's about building the type of team that can play different ways in the playoffs. We just watched the Minnesota Timberwolves built this incredibly big team that was able to withstand Nikola Jokic, but then now they've run into this team that needs a switch heavy type lineup, right? And so they don't have the personnel to do that. They're not adaptable enough to play with different teams and different lineups against their different strengths and weaknesses. And so that is one of the things I think the Rockets have a unique opportunity with this number 3 pick is to match some of those things that they don't have yet in these lineups. And I think Alex Sarr definitely fits that.
And again, like we've talked about this, I think Sengun has earned the benefit of the doubt with his play this past year, that you can comfortably start factoring him into your long-term decision-making of, okay, well, what would a roster with Sengun and Sarr look like in a couple of years, right? What are the pieces that you would need to put around Alperen Sengun to really either, complement his strengths or mask his weaknesses? And I think Sarr projects to be able to do both of those things. Same way that we talked about Jabari being the perfect complement to Sengun at the 4, I think we maybe oversold Jabari a little bit when that happened. Jabari hasn't quite realized his full potential yet there. And I do think some of that has to do with he's not quite the weak side shot blocker, the rim deterrent that we thought he would be at his size. Not saying that he can't get there at some point in time. He has improved considerably as a defender. But if you're talking about a lineup where, first off, I would feel comfortable about putting Jabari at the 3 right now, even though his ball handling skills aren't phenomenal yet. Like, it's not like the Rockets would be asking him to be a primary creator out of that 3 spot, right? He would just do the same thing that he's kind of doing right now. He would just do it instead of Dillon Brooks at the 3 spot. But picturing a front court lineup of Jabari and Sarr, Jabari's still listed at 6'11", but let's face it, he's like a 7-footer. 2 7-footers with an insane wingspan, insane length, to complement Alperen Sengun in that front court. That, to me, is the way you build a team around Alperen Sengun and feel comfortable about it and completely erase any concerns, which, again, there shouldn't be concerns about can Sengun play defense and this, that, and the other. He proved it this past year. Top 10 defense with Sengun in there. The defense got worse when Sengun got hurt. That should be more than enough evidence for fans to stop with this conjecture about, can Sengun play defense? No, he can. It's fine. But then you put those 2 guys next to him, and I think you're cooking with something special there.
Yeah, man. And we really need another functional big in our lineups. That's why these guys are so intriguing. And like you said, that versatility can match really well. And we know this is an Ime Udoka type of guy. This defensive versatility, that's what he's looking for in a top prospect. And so that's what makes Sarr just such an amazing prospect and why he's going to be talked about in the top 2 picks. But if there's a way that Sarr actually falls, because this is an eye of the beholder draft, and that means these teams could fall in love with anybody, especially the Atlanta Hawks, who have just entered this process because they weren't expecting the number 1 pick. Sam Vecini talked about this. And so they're playing catch up right now with these prospects. They didn't expect to be in this range. And so there could be a guy that just really speaks to them and pushes Sarr down to us. So we need to talk about him.
And that's actually really funny because that's like the antithesis of the way the Rockets do things, because the Rockets intentionally push back their draft. So they like hold off until the last minute. And they're like, all right, we'll start looking at these guys now. We're not going to worry about it months in advance. I have one more point that I wanted to add about Sarr's potential fit on this team and with this roster and alongside some of these guys I'm going to piggyback off the same point that I made earlier, where I do think his transition from overtime elite to the NBL is actually should be, a feather in his cap, a point in his favor, as opposed to a knock on him, is that it tells me that he isn't a guy that like thinks that he's the guy, right? Like obviously most hoopers, if you're playing at an elite level, you've got to have some level of confidence in yourself. But I don't think he's going to be a type of guy that expects to come in and take all the shots or become a number one option or whatever. I think he understands that his role is more or less as a complementary piece, as an ancillary piece. And that fits because the Rockets already have a couple guys who project to be their alphas, who already are their alphas, right? It's Sengun and Jalen. Cam Whitmore projects to probably be one of those types of guys down the line. Maybe Jabari Smith Jr. can still get there with his offensive game as he continues to refine his offensive role and everything and work on the handle. Maybe he can be at a place where, comfortable, 20 points per game kind of scorer, be able to create his own looks, somewhere down the line. But Sarr doesn't scream that to me. And I think it's important to be able to have a mix of those guys, right? The Rockets have enough guys who are supposed to be their alpha top dog, like tier one scorer guys. And that's Jalen, that's Sengun, and then Cam Whitmore, who they just added to the mix this past season. Whereas now you've got Tari and Jabari and Amin Thompson, who are kind of your ancillary pieces. They're your complementary pieces. The guys, I don't want to call them glue guys, but like the guys who hold everything together, right? And make life easier for those other guys, for those tier one guys. And Sarr, to me, kind of fits into that second group, I think, almost perfectly.
Yeah, totally agree, man. That's the sell for Sarr. And then not only does he have that, but that he can just wait and develop those other skills that aren't quite ready to blossom right now. There's no rush for him. He can go in and do what he does well and does best, and that's just play defense and complement these other guys. As he gets his skill development up, you have the upside of the high-end guys that we were talking about.
And we already saw that, there's the reporting that Stephon Castle doesn't want to go to a team with a starting point guard. The fact that
don't care.
The fact that, well, sure, but the fact, but right, like he's gunning for a big role, right out of the gate. The fact that Sarr already went from what could have been a bigger role and a chance to really showcase himself and just dominate OTE, and instead went to the NBL to get a better experience, to face tougher competition, tells me that he'd probably be more amenable to the idea of being drafted to a good organization with a great structure, a great coaching staff, an up-and-coming young core, and a position where he wouldn't have to be a day one immediate impact contributor, where he could just work on growing his game and then getting to a place where he can realize and actualize his potential as an NBA player, which is why I think the Houston Rockets would be a fantastic fit for him. So on that note, Madison, you know the drill. Let everybody know where to track you down at.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. Come talk Rockets basketball and NBA draft.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, or on YouTube, just search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe. Give us your thoughts on Alex Sarr in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.